Sagar sir, please go ahead. We are live now. Unmute yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this. Welcome on behalf of ASSOCHAM, Climate Change Council, Council on Environment, Climate Change and Water, on this first webinar of a series of a few webinars on ESG, the defining elements of future investments. It is my pleasure to welcome our moderator for today, Architect Gaurav Shori. Quickly introducing Architect Gaurav Shori is a visiting faculty.
Sagar, you're not audible. Switch off your video, please.
Gaurav, can you confirm I'm audible?
No.
Now you are, but it's still breaking.
Switch off your video and it will work.
So, can I go back?
Still breaking, Kushagra?
I think Neeraj, you can take over.
Yes, please. So, welcome, dear attendees. I'm Neeraj. I'm looking after the Environment, Green Building and Water Councils at ASSOCHAM. So, our today's webinar, for today's webinar, we have Architect Gaurav Shuri with us. We have Mr. Masood Malik with us and Mr. Prabodh Acharya ji with us. And Architect Gaurav Shuri is the moderator for the session. I would request Architect Gaurav Shuri to please, start the program. I'll not take much time and would like to invite him. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Neeraj ji, for organizing this. And welcome to the esteemed panelists, Mr. Malik, Mr. Acharya, and also a hearty welcome to everybody listening in from all over Delhi, all over the country, despite the odds, despite the times, brighter times ahead in future. And welcome all of you. I hope that this session will be very, very worth your time. Every moment is precious. So let's dive straight in. I'd like to start by first introducing the panelists. Neeraj ji, if you could just bring up the profiles of the panelists on the screen. Mr. Malik is an esteemed speaker for today. He is heading the environmental group within ASSOCHAM. And other than that, of course, he is JMD at the Ramki Enviro group. And again, this is a global company. They've been working very closely with industries and investors. And I think he's the one who's going to bring a lot of experience in ESG, having worked diversely across several sectors, several companies, being on this side of the desk and that side of the desk. So he was sharing some of his experiences in the prior sessions that we've had, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from him. As you can see, he's been involved with a lot of Government of India initiatives as well, including the MOEF, and CPCB initiatives towards regulatory framework standards and the Sustainable Development Goals, which he will also be touching upon today. Briefly to highlight the commonalities, the lines of common communication between SDGs and ESGs. Then we have Mr. Acharya next. Mr. Prabodh Acharya is the CSO, and this is not an easy label to carry in an organization the scale of JSW, and he has borne this responsibility on his shoulders for a very long time now. You can see the experience cuts across several strategic sectors in India: steel, energy, cement, paints, infrastructure, and he's had to look at implementation of sustainability issues in the companies of that scale. And very just before the session was starting, he shared the kind of impact that the new, the kind of how should one put it, the human-induced climate change effects that we see these days, the kind of impact that is having on investments, on the scale of investments, on how they are getting delayed. This is despite Corona. Corona is something else, but just climate-based impacts. And I would love for Mr. Acharya to share his experiences on how that has been and what the likelihood of how the future is going to shape up is going to be. So without much further ado, I'd like to hand it over to them. But just before we start, I'd like to take 5 minutes to set the context as to what is ESG. A lot of you might be interested in knowing the background of what is ESG, where is it coming from. So just give me a moment and I'll bring up now. I need to share some slides. Yeah, just one second. So just let me know, Neeraj ji, let me know as soon as you can see my screen.
Yes.
Visible.
Visible? Perfect. Great. So for those of you who are here to kind of, just expand your horizons in terms of what is ESG, I'm going to take you through a very, very quick overview. Yeah, environmental, social, and corporate governance. I'd also like to just let you know that I'm working on two screens right now. So in case you see me look this way, I'm just looking at my other screen. So don't get confused with speaking to somebody else in between. Yeah. So what is ESG? It refers to three central factors, as you can see on the screen, in measuring sustainability and societal impact of an investment. So it's very fascinating that we are having this conversation today, because for once we can start looking at environmental issues as they are being demanded by the investor, holding corporates to account, industry to account, to take on these initiatives, right? And analysis of these criteria is thought by some to help to better determine future financial performance of companies in terms of return and risk. Now, this is a demand that is garnered over time. It has taken some time to come to where it is today. And over here, I'd like to bring up this slide. Now, this is a very tricky slide, but I think Masuji touched upon this in our prior preparatory meetings that we were having. This is a very interesting slide. It shows you the difference between high context and low context cultures. And I'm quoting a great thinker, Werner Erhard over here, who said that the context is decisive. Now, what does a high context and a low context culture mean? Very important. A low context culture is a culture that doesn't have too much of a historic, relationship-based, cultural background. It's relatively nascent, it's relatively fresh. And in anthropological studies, they say that a low context culture, they are very straight, they're very direct. Jo wo bolte hain, that's what they mean. What they say is what they mean. What they mean is what they say. Now, in a place like India, India is a high context culture. What does that mean in terms of business? A lot of business gets done on the basis of personal relationships. A lot of things get furthered on the basis of personal relationships. But the challenge that high context cultures face is also towards change, because when change comes, then the high context culture business owner will call up another friend and say, have you heard of this? What do you think about it? If the friend says, don't worry about it, nothing to bother right now, then the person is going to say, okay, I trust your opinion. I'm going to put this on rest right now and not look at it. Now that tends to impact environment in the long run, but it is also a very interesting pro quality, because as soon as one person does it, he calls up relationships and friends who own businesses and says, I've done it, it works. Boom, there's a massive cascading effect and everybody else takes it up as well. So I don't know where we are in this spectrum right now. And I think that Mr. Malik was actually thinking about this on these lines. So he'll be able to flag, where are we right now? How much is the pushback? How much is the acceptance? And I'm going to let him do the talking as far as that is concerned. Now, very quickly, I did want to show you these. Very important to see satellite images of the cities in India today. You're looking at Bangalore right now. You will next look at Hyderabad. You will now look at Delhi. And please look at the density of construction over here. Look at the lack of green cover over here. This is only to establish the context of what if not. This is again something that I will request the panelists to address as the discussion proceeds. These are our landfills, and again another very nice screenshot of Delhi with the banks of the Yamuna, which is again slated to be developed. So it's going to look exactly like what the right side looks like. Now, in terms of historical context, very quickly I'm going to cover this. It's been on from the 50s all the way to as recently as 2015. I won't get into the details. We can share these slides with you. The conversation has been happening since then. It's gone through philanthropy. It's gone through social responsibility. It's gone through long horizon investments. It's gone through GRI and triple bottom line. And now we're talking about ESG. So very quickly, again, quoting some experts in the field, Milton Moskowitz and Alex Edmonds. The best companies to work for, incidentally, are also very compliant on ESG. And investors feel very safe and secure investing their money with companies that are ESG compliant. Now, this is the international environment, and we need to look at how ready are we as far as the Indian environment is concerned. Now, there is a lot of confusion around ESG as well. I wanted to just dispel that very quickly. There are a lot of different names to call the same thing, but as per the latest data and reports that have been done across 350 global investors, we have now arrived at this term, which is environmental, social, and corporate governance. And this term is here to stay. So that's where we are right now. This was the 2008 survey that was done, right? That's all I wanted to share just to set the stage. What is the context? What is India facing? What is the world doing? And now I'd like to switch it over to our esteemed panelists. I'm going to stop sharing screen. And I would first like to invite Mr. Acharya. Now, there were a few questions that we had in mind, and I'd like to just put this out there, but I would like this to be as interactive as possible. So please use the chat box, please use the Q&A box. Everybody who's listening in, if you have any questions, please fire those questions at us. We may not take all your questions, but the most pertinent ones we'll kind of streamline and we'd like to put across. So let's start with Mr. Acharya. Mr. Acharya, welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time out during the day. Where do you see this headed as far as the Indian industry is concerned? It's a very nascent conversation in India, but it's likely to shape futures in a very big way, given that there's a lot of international investment that's coming in into the Indian industry. And of course, like you were sharing about the impact of climate change, and if we don't take action, then the likelihood of unpredictable events further delaying large-scale financial investments. How do you see this shaping the markets in India in the future?
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you for that introduction and setting the context and the question you specifically asked me to address. Let me give the perspective from business, how this is being looked at, how this is being shaped up, and what I could see in future is going forward. So before that, there are a lot of words being used in this field. And you also stated and you showed a slide where the terms has evolved over. And I have seen many people, including me in this field for last 30 years after my graduation, doing environmental management. Let me honestly tell that I am also confused in this term. That which is right for the organization, which is not. And I always think that sustainability is the appropriate term, which is, I consider this as a philosophy. And there are various aspects, various group of people are developing and implementing that across the organizations. I always remember that story which I have had in my childhood. If you all know that 5 blind men wanted to know how an elephant looks like. And they went to a fair, and you know the story. And I always see in my last 30-year career also that the sustainability, ESG, triple bottom line, triple B, whatever term you coin, they are being seen like that. Different people are touching different aspects of business and framing an opinion. So nobody, earlier there used to be CSR, there used to be philanthropy, and you talk to the finance team, they will talk about how the business is making profit, and that's sustainability. So what I wanted to say, sustainability is a philosophy which is developing. But as an organization, what we as a business need to focus is that it is important how my business is going to be sustainable in the long term. As a human race, if we look at as a human race, you showed about the cities, how it is growing with dense population. So as a human race, it is our sustainability. We are talking about how as a human race will be sustainable because our numbers are growing. And that is where we are concerned. So as a business, I'm concerned about my business sustainability. As a human race, I am concerned about the human sustainability. Forget about whether Earth will survive, solar system will survive. They will survive without human also. So I'm not talking about that. Now coming to the aspect of business, how we look at sustainability is, I told, it is all those aspects which affects me as a business. And that is, in other words, they use the term called materiality. So what are the material issues that as a business is impact me, and I as a business have an impact on others, whether it is society, it is environment, is the investor, it is regulator, it is education, academia, how it is impact. So that is what now people are talking about double materiality. Again, these are all coinage of terms. Now coming, what is this ESG that we are talking about? That's your question, and how it is going to define and how it is playing role in business. So what is then ESG? If sustainability was there, it is going to be there, then what is this? I say ESG is a risk assessment tool. Who is using that? The investors. The people who are putting money in the business, they are using this term ESG because they wanted to know what is of my risk of putting my money in this company. If this company is not going to run because there is an environmental risk, or there is a social risk, or there is a governance risk. We have seen recently many of the companies how they have gone with the fraud cases without having proper corporate governance. So investors are looking at it. So therefore, this is a risk assessment tool. So if it is a risk assessment tool and investors, both institutional investors and small-time investors started looking at ESG, then how as a business we are getting geared up? And what is the talk happening in Indian businesses? So because, these concepts are mostly getting influenced through, you can say, from the developed world, and it comes because now a lot of investments are also coming from there. So naturally, we as Indian business are getting geared up. Now let me give example that I can give example of how we are getting it. So ESG is being talked, and it is a part of our process, governance process. So that is how I really do not like the term ESG, honestly, if you like. I would rather stick to sustainability rather than talking about ESG, because I clearly see ESG is a risk management tool. The only advantage what we have in ESG that we have defined parameter performance set criteria to measure. Again, there is no standardization. Everybody uses their own criteria, but that is the advantage. So we know exactly where we stand. So what we have done, we have a board level committee that looks at and gives directions. Then we have set sustainability targets across our organizations. You call it ESG targets. That being monitored and reviewed on a monthly basis by the management, and set KPIs has put for different level of the organization. So that is how we are driving, because we are seeing that like looking at others and looking at us, there are certain risk and opportunity, and that is what I was talking about that the significant risk that a business is going to face is because of the climate change issues, and that is clearly coming out of the World Economic Forum risk assessment consistently from last couple of years. If you see, the single largest business risk is the failure to the climate change agreement or negotiation, and that is clearly linked with every aspect of the business, and we could see that it's happening, and that is where, because we are majorly in a sector in infrastructure sector, steel, cement, and energy, we could see there is a clear opportunity for us, because, if you want to build a climate resilient society, then you need high strength steel. So steel is essentially needed, or cement is essentially needed. Okay, so if we have, because ultimately this is going to happen and we have to get ready. So if you want to build a renewable energy society, or you want to go for energy transformations, steel is needed. So essentially we are in a positive thing is that this has a business advantage if I talk about the opportunity because of the climate change, but clearly there are risks. The example what we were discussing before the webinar, we are observing the intensity of rain in the monsoon is increasing instead of duration, and that practically affecting, if I was giving example of one of our steel plant which is currently under expansions, and in last year because of the intense rainfall we found that got delayed. So it has clearly a financial risk because we don't ready in the time. We are also increasingly see, because of the temperature rise in the summer, the employee productivity is decreasing. because when the temperature rises, you don't become that productive. So forget about the air conditioning requirement in India as a country. As a business, we see these are small things which is going to affect. This is affecting now. Forget about the impact which will cause because of the sea rise, the level of sea rise, or because of these cyclones which is happening. You see, East Coast and West Coast, both the coasts now we are getting frequent cyclones, and that is disrupting our businesses. So these, if we do not as organizations evaluate as a risk, obviously will not be prepared to manage. And now the investors are looking at that closely, and they're asking uncomfortable questions to the organization, how you are identifying the risk, how you are planning to mitigate those, and then how you are progressing that. Is the ESG is a business strategy, part of the business strategy. And I'm really thankful that in this organization where I'm working, at least that has come to the high priority. Right now, two things which has high priority in our strategy. One is sustainability or ESG, another is digitization, because they are closely related. And that is being driven from the very top of the organization. So it's already, being driven. So in that way, possibly we in a big industrial houses have an advantage now, and our leaders has been are recognizing that ESG risk need to be managed properly. Otherwise, our business possibly will not be sustainable in the long term. So that is a good thing happening in India, I could see, because I have worked in two big industrial houses in India. I could see the same trend which I saw in my previous organizations, which is also a big multinational, Aditya Birla, and now here in JSW. So both the industries I have seen very closely that this is a boardroom discussions. No more it is a discussions which happen outside, kind of philanthropy discussion. It's no more a philanthropy discussion. It's a business discussion. It is linked to the business. So that way, I would think Indian industry has rapidly transited. There could be many factors which is pushing these transitions, but I would see that Indian corporates are transiting faster than possibly our counterpart in advanced countries. There could be, and you see, we do not have that kind of strong regulation yet. I'm not telling we do not have, we have. So, NGRBC or VRR reporting, all these things are coming, and now BRS are coming. So we are having started getting those regulatory pressure. But mostly the interesting thing, what I see in Indian corporate is mostly now happening proactively. And when it happens proactively, because you as a business or any person, you do things when you are forced to do. But when you do proactively, because you are saying this is good for business. But my concern at the same time that, in India, we have a lot of MSME sectors, and they are also backbone to our economy. And how this can be driven to all business sectors, and they consider this and in their business planning. That is where, frankly, I do not have an experience to talk about MSME, but what I see and observe that this has not yet populated to that. It is now by the big businesses, listed companies, they are focusing, and mostly the big businesses, because always there will be some leaders, and leaders will always be leaders, and you have to be proactive. And I am happy that we are in leading positions with that. With that, I'll stop here, and I'll possibly have some more examples when it comes, and I'll be happy to take any questions in the due courses. Let us listen Masu's observations. So
super. Thank you so much, Mr. Acharya. That was really wonderful and very, very heartening to hear. I think as a country, we tend to look westwards for a lot of direction in terms of sustainability, but you captured it so well. And I think that when we compare ourselves in terms of environmental action and affirmative action and initiative, in many cases, we might be way ahead of our Western so-called developed counterparts. And it's so heartening to hear that this action has now gone into the boardrooms. It's being driven top down. Along with digitization, it's no longer something that is like a compliance or have to. It's something that everybody can see makes a lot of business sense. At the same time, you've very beautifully addressed a question that is in our question box. Mansoor Lari ji has asked the question exactly to do with MSMEs, that how can Indian MSMEs adopt ESG compliance, especially those MSMEs who are vendors or suppliers to multinational large enterprises in the global value and supply chains. So I think you've kind of touched upon that yes, this is a raw nerve. How can the MSMEs do it? It's a gray area. Of course, thank you for being very straightforward that you're not in a position to comment, but it is a concern, right? Because it is a pyramid. At the end of the day, base of the pyramid would have so many number of businesses that get impacted by this. Thank you, Mr. Acharya. I'd now like to shift the conversation to Mr. Malik. Mr. Malik, your views on this and also your views on what Mr. Acharya said. Is it as affirmative, as positive, or is there a slightly not so rosy side of the picture as well? Mr. Malik, over to you, please.
Thank you, Gaurav, and thank you, Acharya ji, for sort of setting up the conversation in such an articulate way. I think the journey that you talked about, Gaurav, when you started off, the introduction that you gave, that from philanthropy and corporates and people of means, more than just corporates, people of means saying that I will do good to others beyond me. That being the origin of this move to today, where it's probably a lot to do with on one hand reputation management, brand, and on the other hand risk management and business continuity. And I think there is. So if you ask me where the journey is, whether you call it sustainability or ESG, and I do use these two terms interchangeably, and I agree with Acharya ji that I see ESG actually as a subset of sustainability. Sustainability being the philosophy, being a way of life actually, and therefore a way of working and a way of business as well. I think the conversation has changed. When I was a student and studying environmental science or technology, it was a lot to do with conservation. Yeah, and there was such a strong welfare and philanthropy angle to it that at that point in time, probably I used to think that the only career available in the sustainability space is in an NGO, which is translating the vision of a person of means into reality by doing conservation projects. That was as a student, my view of sustainability. I'll be working, in creating urban forests or something like that. Yeah. And then I saw the second transition happening that was touched upon by Acharya ji, which was that it started becoming a reputation aspect. When more people started doing it, then suddenly it became something that people could differentiate themselves on. So like people differentiate themselves on quality, this became another differentiation and became an element of brand. And then the moment it becomes brand, there is visibility, there is risk associated with it. Because the moment you stand up and say, I'm good, then people will put a spotlight on you and show you, oh, you're good, but have you seen that? Have you seen that? Have you seen that? Those are challenging questions that stop. And then the risk element started coming into this whole discussion, where, and especially reputational risk, that was the first of the risks I saw getting integrated into the sustainability or ESG. People used to call it newspaper risk. It's not real risk, So from philanthropy to brand to newspaper risk, which is I should not look bad. And in the last 10 years, again, echoing the lead taken by Acharya ji, I think some fundamental business issues started coming to fore. Limits to growth. Areas where you just could not expand anymore, even if the business case for expansion was there, you just cannot expand anymore. Where public and community pressures started coming in, judicial activism and enforcement and NGT started coming in. And when all of these aspects from newspaper risk became real physical risk. The third step that I've seen this journey has been in terms of the extreme weather events and natural resources becoming a risk factor. So suddenly, even if ores are available, they're not accessible. Even if a port can be built, it is not going to sustain because of extreme climatic conditions or sea level rise. And suddenly physical factors beyond just public pressures, enforcement, legal issues, becoming real risk, physical factors. There's no water. Yeah, in some parts of the country, where and the only source of water supply is groundwater, and that is depleting at a humongous rate. So if you set up a plant today that is supposed to break even in decades, and you know that you don't have sustainability of water supply, then sustainability risk takes in a new dimension. So this was the next evolution. I'm here to share with and progressively as an environmental professional, as a student, sorry, I saw myself moving from the 9th orbit, Pluto, Uranus type presence, to slowly moving towards the center, progressively. And as Acharya Saab said, talking about, board, and he said that it was interesting to hear from him that it is now a key element of business strategy. I'm here to talk about one final journey where sustainability or ESG is the business strategy. It is not just a part of the business strategy. It is the business strategy, because I think from philanthropy to brand to risk to mitigation to sustaining our industries today to a fundamental question, which is, does it mean a financial upside? Can you create a business out of it? Can you make money out of it? Can you create economic value and wealth? Which I think in this space is the final frontier. That's the experiment that I'm a part of, and I'm really happy to share more experiences around that. But I genuinely believe that in the context of the risk, in the context of limits to growth, in the context of the future and the need for future proofing, there is significant business opportunity now, where the next transition will be ESG or sustainability being, a department in an organization, being one of the things that a company does, to being integrated into every aspect, a vision of a future where there is no sustainability department or ESG group, because it is so deeply embedded that it is the business of the company. And I'm part of an experiment, probably the largest experiment that is happening in this part of the world, in this particular space. The jury is still out whether this is going to create the economic value. We are confident that it will, and all the results so far indicate that sustainability truly is a business opportunity, and can create economic value in addition to creating environmental value and stakeholder value and social value. So I'll stop there and look forward to other questions.
Super. That's absolutely fabulous. So well put, Mr. Malik. I think it's really captured the entire essence of how this is going to shape up in the future. And I think both of you have hit upon this very beautifully. If you remember, we had kind of discussed this earlier, that is this old wine in a new bottle? Is this just something that's a fad? Is this just something that's, just here for a short while in another avatar? But the way you both said that, look, the philosophy is sustainability. And I think that's here to stay. It's not just, it's gone through the transition of brand, of image, of newspaper risk, and now it is something that is absolutely here as a core part of organizations, of businesses being driven like that. And now the next level is that it is a business opportunity in itself. That is that so far it was a means to an end. Now we are looking at that it is an end unto itself. And it can very soon create those avenues for future businesses as well. This is also very heartening to hear, because I'd just like to share very quickly, we work extensively in the domain of education with school children and college children. And we do this with all students when we start a program. We ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the answers are, very, very diverse. You will hear Bombay wale directors zarur bolte hain, producer actors zarur bolte hain, Delhi wale politicians zarur bolte hain. But other than that, you've got engineer, architect, fashion designer, the whole plethora. It's a big list. And mostly what we do is we fill up one board with that list. And then we ask them on the second board, what do you need for a green and sustainable planet? Within 5 minutes of this exercise, to all the students, it is clear that there is no connection between this side and this side. And it's shocking. But from what you have said, I think that once the fiber changes, once the very essence and the fabric of business changes to include it, people will be screaming themselves hoarse at the school level, at the university level. NGO nahi hai. It is actually mainstream business that we're going to be working for, and it's not just going to stop at urban forests, but we're going to be looking at how to cash in on that and how to take it to the next level. So beautifully said. So there are a couple of questions that I'd like to take. The first one, very interesting. Given India has a long runway left for better economic and social growth, and at the same time, there is the imperative of climate change. What is the panelists' view on prioritizing sectors versus trying it all? So let's say, for example, there's spearheading happening. Can a few sectors, maybe energy, mobility, food and agriculture, start by really focusing very strongly on all these? And then slowly it has a trickle-down effect. This is a question from Shailendra Singh. And I'd like to keep it open to whoever one of you would like to take it. Or I personally would feel that, oh, this is something that we should do, cluster bomb. But there is some sense in that question. So over to you.
Let me come in here, Gaurav. But before I answer that question, let me supplement some of these facts which Masood just elaborated, that how it is becoming a part of business risk. He told about water risk. He talked about environmental risks. I'll just give few real examples. I have seen operations closed down for months because of want of water. Because when the industry was set before 1947, I'll not name the factories, of course, but I can guarantee these are facts I'm telling. When it was set, nobody was there. Even we have operations when we set up, people were not there. If you look at any steel plants, they come up with community. Community grows, then it becomes a city. So city grows into operations, then the nature becomes different. So as a company, if you do not take care of those environmental risk and social risks, it really becomes a business imperative, business case. That is just, I wanted to supplement what Masood is telling. I completely agree, because he told, in fact, that is what I strongly believe, that going forward in a business, there should not be sustainability department or ESG department. And truly we are trying to do that. Of course, somebody like me will be there to drive the strategy part, but the job is done by different groups. For example, if something has to be done on energy, it's not my department. I am not going to do. It's the people who are operating on the energy, they are going to do, right? And I am happy that that has percolated. So with that supplementation, let me come back to the question. Question on the climate change and India's approach, what should be. But let me tell you that India is a country which is going to get hard hit by climate change. Let us accept the fact. Whoever is to be blamed, we all as human beings to be blamed for the situation where we are. And again, I'm telling, this is very long-term cyclical, meteorological events. A lot of I hear argument that it is anyway going to happen. There are ices and there are, heat going up, and then, it's a cyclical matter. So climate change deniers are there, but I'm a climate change believer. What I'm trying to tell that this is going to happen, and India is going to get hard hit because of two reasons. One is that we have one of the longest coastline. Second, we have one of the largest population density in the world. I think Masood possibly will like to show the slide which he showed. I've seen 3 states, if you take, center India and Bangladesh, more number of people are living in this tiny dot of the world than people living in entire US, Europe and Russia together. So we are going to get affected. So what should be our stand? Sectors to take the lead. Obviously, energy transition has to happen, and it has to happen rapidly. So therefore, all the sectors are going to take the lead. But there will be some sectors where the transformation is easy to happen, and some sector where the transformation will take time. And that is where I relate myself, because we are in an operation which is hard to abate sector. Because in our sector, mitigation of climate change, the technological developments are going to take time. Therefore, we are hard. But that doesn't mean we will not take actions, because there will be definitely actions which you need to take. So in answer to the question, I want to tell that transition has to happen everywhere, even in the single individual level from the house, the way we live. Because we have seen in one generation how our living style has changed. If you look at Indian philosophy of living is truly harmony with nature, and if everybody in the world would have lived the way India lives, we would not have seen this happening so soon, at least. So it is going to happen. Different sector will have different transition path. Some sector will have easy to transit. Some sector will have difficulty to transit. Look what is happening in energy transition. How the renewable sector is growing in India. How the company is giving they are taking voluntary actions to complete transit. Let me take the example of JSW Energy. We have seen that we have to be a renewable company. We'll shut down all our thermal plants. We cannot operate coals. We have realized, the management has realized, we are aligning our target to science-based target. We have given public declaration that all the existing 3 assets what we have, we are going to liquidate them. But it's a business decision. I can't liquidate today, but we will liquidate before 2050 or 2040, whenever, but we are not going to invest in coal-based thermal power generations. How it is happening, why it is happening. It is not that companies look to do that, because ultimately I told everybody is in a business. Now thing is that look at the technological development, and the generation of renewable power is becoming cheaper. So it is becoming easier for the energy sector to transit. But at the same time, there has to be a will, there has to be a commitment, and there has to be a plan to achieve that. And at the same time, I told how it is going to be difficult in cement and steel, but still, what are the actions these companies are taking to mitigate? I'll stop here.
Super, extraordinary. That's really wonderful to hear, Mr. Acharya, because that was one question that after Mr. Malik spoke, it was a question that was racking my brain that, hey, if ESG then takes on the avatar of being an integral part of the fabric of business in the future, what do traditional businesses, large-scale businesses, such as the ones that you mentioned, what is in their future? But you seem to have put it in absolute stark black and white that, hey, we've got to dissolve those assets. They're not going to be with us. By 2040, 2050, we're going to be transitioning to what the world is looking at transitioning to. So I think that's kind of put that question at rest. Mr. Malik, anything that you wanted to add to what Mr. Acharya said?
No, I just thought I'll just share one visual that I have always found very striking. I don't know if it is, if you're able to see it, but if you can, just let me know.
Clear, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think I sometimes use this to drive home a point. I think what I'm trying to say is that you see that little circle, and the SDG sort of mapped around it. It is true that there are more people within that circle than the rest of this whole image. So this is where the SDGs or the sustainability agenda or the programs or the new transitions that we're talking about, this is where it will succeed or fail. I think there are many, I'm not going to take much time to talk about. I just wanted to touch upon a couple of facts. This is just looking at Asia. People talk about Asia being, most affected, this, that, and all. Within Asia, compared to the only other place which is probably more vulnerable than us is Bangladesh, as a population, as a populous country. Our vulnerability to climate change, and this is first order impact only. This is not second order, third order consequential impacts. By 2050, that is, at least for many people who are in this call, part of our lifetimes, a significant high risk. So, which is from heat waves to extreme climatic situations, to water stress, to decline of crop yields, to annual share of capital stock that is at risk. because of and obviously land surface changes. To answer the question that was raised, which are the sectors? Now, obviously, I mean, these are some trends that are happening. There are some changes that are happening in the energy consumption trend. There are changes that are happening from a socioeconomic and geopolitical standpoint, where some regions of the world are growing faster than others. And if you ask me, therefore, what really appear to be the most important aspect of change, I think it is power. And I think if the, and actually, let me step back. It's energy. And I think it is whether it is through hydrogen or whether it is through other forms of conventional renewables. Can you imagine I never thought that we'll be calling renewables into two categories, conventional renewables and new renewables. But it is true today. Yeah, conventional renewables with wind and solar being conventional and hydrogen, etc., and fuel cells becoming new. This is, if you ask me, the future. This is really where I think most amount of effort, most amount of funding, if it goes, you will make this transition possible. Gaurav, you're on mute.
Unmute here.
Yeah, sorry. Elaborating away. So yeah, that absolutely captured it. In fact, just to add to what you had just said, Mr. Malik, I'd like to share a few slides to kind of absolutely take your SDG slide forward. Just give me a moment. Amit, can you give me share rights for a moment? Now the slides I'm going to share need to be taken with a pinch of salt. There is a dark humor that's embedded in them, but nonetheless, they are statistically accurate. So I didn't want to show you these. These are slides that we normally show to illustrate the case in point that India has about 1/4 the land area of the United States of America and 4 times its population. And if we were to look at the 5 biggest cities of the US and contrast them to the 5 biggest cities of India, then this is what you get in terms of population comparison. Mumbai compares near about to NYC. And when I talk about New York, I'm talking about actually larger or the greater New York region and not just New York City. NCR, Delhi compares to greater LA. And then you've got Kolkata that compares to Chicago and Chennai, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Bangalore, Delaware. But the next slide is what hits you. Because you're absolutely right, Mr. Malik. As soon as I start talking about land area, then I've got way more population in way lesser land in each city of India that I'm talking about. And when I look at my country's population densities, then I'm talking about population densities that are 10, 20, even 30 times the scale of US cities. Now, obviously, the question that arises over here is why am I showing a comparison with the US? Well, because mostly in my country, people want to grow up to be the United States of America. The only thing that we don't ask each other and ourselves is that can we even sustain that kind of a lifestyle? And over here again, Mr. Acharya beautifully captured it that, hey, at a personal level, at an individual level, the way we've lived, we've always lived in harmony with nature, not just in harmony, but in worshipful harmony with nature. And I think another thing that we need to look at is the future investors who are as yet in school and as yet in universities, who I am focused on transforming the minds of, will be asking much harder questions and would probably have a much more severe future to deal with, like Mr. Malik just raised. The kind of risks that we are talking about, we may not be there to face those risks. How do I even begin to think that I have a 7-year-old daughter and I want to prepare her for the kind of desertification that IPCC predicted in 2008, or the kind of sea level rise that Bangladesh is likely to face, and so many people are likely to move to other places as climate refugees, which is already happening in so many places in the world. How does one even begin to address that issue? But we'll keep that for another day. So I'm just going to stop sharing and quickly take some questions from the question box. We've got some very interesting questions coming in. There's a question that I'd like to personally address because it's very close to my heart, and I'd like to keep it open to everybody, but also invite Neeraj ji and Kushagra to pipe in for a moment if you think that you can answer this. Somnath Sarkar has asked, I've been working for 12 years on energy management. Now suddenly I'm working on ESG. My question is how to contribute to ESG, being an energy management professional. So I think this has been addressed, by the way, Somnath, by both Mr. Malik and Mr. Acharya, that there's no real hard line, between if you're an energy management professional, you are an environmental expert. And like Mr. Malik said, that's what I studied. That's what I did. I did environmental technology when I was in college. And now I see the application pervading into hardcore business. But over to the panelists, what would you say to a person who is dealing with this career crossover dichotomy?
There is no dichotomy, actually.
There isn't.
There is no dichotomy. I think if you're working in the energy field, please continue to work in the energy field, because there is no greater contribution to sustainability than fixing this energy challenge that we have, the energy crisis. And I'm talking about the sustainable energy crisis that we have. Even though with gigawatts of capacity being added on the renewable side, true sustainability still eludes us. Those numbers are very hard, and those realities are equally harder. The economic realities of coal consumption in India cannot be denied. There is a lot more that needs to be done on the energy transition side, on the efficiency side, on the conservation side, and decarbonization, especially. If you ask me today, for a thermal power company, which is basically using coal, there are decarbonization pathways available even for continued operation of thermal power. And I think those are areas that are difficult to work in. They are probably not that newsworthy, that I'm actually working in making coal-based thermal power more sustainable. Nobody likes to hear that. Yeah. But actually, if you ask me from a life cycle standpoint, if you step away and look at the true environmental cost versus benefit, maybe it is the right thing to do for India. So I think please continue to work in the energy field. You will be contributing to core sustainability.
So beautifully said, Mr. Malik. I would just like to echo what you just said. There's this document that is in my dimag mein chhap gaya. I want to share this with everybody. The Integrated Energy Policy document, which made it amply clear in 2006 that our energy transition is likely to be, in parallel. The focus is going to be on thermal power generation, regardless of how powerful the declarations are in terms of switching. And there is definitely a way and mean of focusing on that. There was also a major stress on the integrated energy policy on demand side management, saying that, look, let's look at get real. Let's not just flood the market with more products and more products and more products. Let's try and see how we can go on to conscious consumption. Let's start creating a conscious consumer. And if we do that, we can actually coexist with thermal power. That's in essence the gist of that report. It was quite stark in its saying. Anything that you wanted to add to that, Mr. Acharya, or I can take another question.
When I read this question, actually the question rightly should be asked is that you are an energy management professional and you are contributing to ESG. You are not actually in the business. No, we all contribute to build a sustainable business. So whatever function you do, you are actually contributing to building a sustainable business if you do things rightly. Now, coming to ESG specifically, because you have raised, in energy management, you are tremendously addressing two requirements of ESG, environment and social both. By transiting or even managing your current energy efficiently, you are doing a great service to the environment, and the biggest problem in environment what we have is the climate change. So please do so and continue doing that. And having a good energy management systems, you help in having a better contributing to better safety of the people working there, contributing to the social aspect of ESG. So I think, like what we told, Masood told in the beginning, and I told, whatever function you do in the organizations, you all contribute to building a sustainable business, and therefore you manage the ESG risk. And specifically in energy management, your contribution, I think, is more than anybody else. Because what I see in our organization, where we are an energy intensive organization, when you look at the energy what steel sector consumes, it is the second largest, I think, and it is hugely energy intensive organizations. And in India, 70% inputs are coming from coal-based energy. And we are struggling hard how we can work and transit. And that is where focus in any ESG conversation. Even we have a climate action group which centrally drives the strategy towards decarbonization and managing energy. Our energy manager take the lead. So obviously, and for me at least, energy managers are very important.
Absolutely, Mr. Acharya. In fact, what is now increasingly happening is that if we look at the rating systems, we've got GEM that's being backed by the ASSOCHAM, we've got IGBC, we've got GRIA. Now they've also started coming up as, like if a company goes ahead and gets their buildings certified, their real estate is all green, then it contributes to their ESG rating. So as an energy professional, I think this question is actually, it's not even a question. You just focus exactly like you said, Mr. Acharya, just keep focusing on what you're doing. You're already a part of the ESG fraternity. So I'd like to take one more question. This comes from a very dear friend and a senior of mine, Mr. Swastik Harish. He in fact asked me yesterday, that we should consider that what if we don't go for ESG? What are the risks? And I feel that Mr. Malik and Mr. Acharya, both of you have answered that very well. But there is a question that I'd like to take. He says, any transition, say to green or sustainability, which emerges as a core transition, requires a massive reimagination of human resource planning. Reskilling, upskilling, restructuring HR policies, capacity development at a massive scale. What are the panelists' opinions on the outlook of companies and investors on this, especially when it can give rise to huge social risks and eventually enterprise risks? Now, I know that risk was the first thing that Mr. Malik addressed, and that was the driving force long back for businesses to act on this. But what do you feel about the entire restructuring of the business to respond to the green sustainability bit?
Yeah, I think the first 20 years of my career were in risk. The last 5 are in the opportunity space. So let me just turn it around and say the sustainability space is a tremendous human capital opportunity. Tremendous. I think that touching upon disadvantaged parts of our society, where currently, people involved in whether it's waste management or recycling or all those operations, and social inclusion of those at one end, to reskilling and also integrating sustainability science, and I'm talking about real science, as early as possible in curriculums, in technical education, and vocational programs. Because frankly, if you ask me today, it's not easy to hire sustainability professionals today. The demand outstrips supply. Even with the number of institutes churning out whatever they are churning out, I think there is a real opportunity for human capital development in this particular space. And I actually think that we have partnered with the Administrative Staff College of India and with Engineering Staff College of India to run programs with them. Why? Because we are not able to hire as many. We have 22,000 people now globally, and I'm not able to hire as many people as I want to, especially with training in these specific areas of energy, specific areas of recycling, specific areas of effluent treatment, specific areas of air pollution control, specific areas of waste management. These are great careers, and for that, targeted technical training is the enabler. And I think it'll, instead of a risk, it will become a great opportunity.
Perfect. I love that optimism, Mr. Malik. I really appreciate that. You look at it at a global scale, it is a huge opportunity, especially for the upcoming people wanting to make career transitions into this. Businesses are looking for such professionals. It's absolutely demand outstrips supply. And I think it's a huge opportunity for people to look at in terms of upskilling. Of course, there is going to be, like you said, that transition period. Where slowly, steadily you start populating all the positions that are getting created that can then create businesses to be ESG compliant. There will be that transition period, but again, the opportunity cannot be missed. That's really wonderful. There's another question, very interesting, from Mr. Shailendra Singh. He's asking, what is the panelist's view on using internal carbon pricing mechanisms to drive business choices? Well, let me ask your view on carbon tax. So, of course, it's making a steady comeback. I thought that we had buried that hatchet, Back in 2010, 2011, we would speak about that, but it's steadily making a comeback. What are your opinions on this? I think it's perfectly in harmony, but please.
Shall I take it, Masud?
Yes, please. Yes, please. I'll also share a comment. Please start.
Okay. Whether you like it or not, taxes are part of the life. Which bucket you put it is different, and that's the government decisions and the societal decisions. Number one. Number two, specifically on carbon tax and internal carbon pricing, let me first share my views on internal carbon pricing. As a practitioner, I can tell you that use of internal carbon pricing is a very good tool to manage your risk related to climate change and future investment decisions, because when you make a investment decisions, you make a decision on what kind of technology you are going to implement in a business. And if that technology is having a risk in future, whether it is a regulatory risk or it is any financial penalty which can come up, it will be difficult. So even if a country like in India, where we do not have a direct carbon tax, we have indirect carbon tax, we all know, in terms of coal cess or REC compliance and all those things. But when we do not have a carbon tax directly in India, it is prudent for companies, specifically bigger companies where you are technology driven and you make huge investment, to use internal carbon pricing at least for risk evaluations when you are evaluating between available technology. You find that today you find one technology might be little costly, but in going ahead, if you consider internal carbon price as a price, then that in the whole lifetime, that technology might be easier and financially beneficial. And that's what actually we are doing. In all our business, we have fixed carbon tax, which is realistic after studying what is the likely impact, and we have fixed, we call it, in internal carbon pricing, you can use as a shadow price, or you can use as an explicit price and put money and that you use for development. So initial starting point, I will recommend to start at least as a shadow price to use when you take a capex decision. That which technology I should invest, which capex decision I should take, and that is where we are finding value in the initial stage before as a country we get matured to the carbon taxation. This makes sense at least from a risk management perspective, from a decision making perspective. So I find it's quite useful. Masud, your comment, please.
No, I think I'll just echo what you said. I completely agree with the guidance provided. There are only two constants in life, right? Death and taxes. And whether we count it or we don't count it, it's there. The only thing is who's going to pay it. Either I pay it or my son pays it. Yeah, that's the only choice that we have to make today. The taxes have to be paid. In our organization, we happen to be a carbon negative company this year, and we have a goal to go 5x carbon negative. We make very silly goals for ourselves and challenge ourselves to achieve it. We want to be 5x carbon negative in 3 years. Which means that we have to do a lot more by way of direct and indirect carbon capture, mitigation, avoided emissions, etc. And that cannot be enabled. This kind of a capital investment in these technologies that we are investing in right now, whether it is energy transition, whether it is gas to power, whether it is gas to liquid, whether it is plastics to fuel, all those are very capital intensive, and you cannot make them viable unless you have shadow pricing considerations inbuilt into it. So it is a core element of our business strategy. We do not consider, we are conservative, private equity mindset. Therefore, we do not consider revenue from sale of carbon. That is the only caution that we have for ourselves, but we consider it as part of the cost. And then we challenge ourselves to make an investment viable. I think this balance somewhere where you do not take a very aggressive position on future carbon value. Maybe we've all been burnt a little bit by that at some point in time. but still consider it to be a part of your cost is the key for taking sustainable decisions, at least in my sector.
Superb, extremely practical, very pragmatic way of looking at it, Mr. Malik. There are a few questions that I feel are overlapping that I'd like to ask over here, which is an open question. And I think as the head of the Environment Sustainability Group within ASSOCHAM, Mr. Malik, you could perhaps address this. Some people have asked about, there are a lot of misconceptions to do with what is ESG, to be done, not to be done, farzi hai, asli hai. Consultants hai ki nahi hai? Is there enough capacity within the market to actually be able to provide the relevant training? So the question that is asked is that, number one, is ASSOCHAM as an organization looking at creating a pool of sustainability or ESG trained experts that can then guide industry on the right path? Or is there any scope for this?
There is a great, I think that's a great question. It's an absolutely great question, and it is something that we have at the National Council for Environment and Climate Change. We have discussed, debated. I think there is space for ASSOCHAM to support the upskilling in this particular space. It starts at one end, the simplest ways. Someone called Gauravji comes and then asks some interesting questions from some people, and then the debate starts. Yeah, that is one end of that same journey. And to the other end, having a certification program. Yeah, where we can put people through their paces, through credits, and through a rigor of learning, and then at the end of that, certify them. And we have all been, we are all aware of the fact that a lot of such programs do exist, but the rigor is probably missing. But I will take the suggestion of the audience and take it to the council. Our next council meeting, we will discuss this and see if it is time for us to actually put in a rigorous certification program, something which is science-based, extremely technical, and allows people to have a distinction that is of value and recognition in the market.
Superb. I think that perfectly answers that question. Multiple people had that query, and I think that's been put to rest. So, Neeraj, I just wanted to check in. Are we good on time? Can we take a few more questions? There are some very interesting questions coming in.
Yes, Gaurav, I can see a flood of questions. And yes. I think we can definitely take a few more questions. We have around 10-15 minutes to go. Yeah.
Perfect. So of course, there's questions to do with training. There are questions to do with transition. There are questions to do with government coming in, sustainability. I'd like to take this one from Mohammed Nizamuddin Lohar. ESG is getting imbibed into business imperative of most of the corporates, but rather isn't this being looked into as a business opportunity? How do we fight against misconceptions? I think Mr. Malik has very well answered that question. We'll go to the next one. In terms of raising capital from the financial market, what is the panelist's view of India creating its own taxonomy or framework for investment analysis? Or do we have one already? I think this is also a huge opportunity. Mr. Malik, opportunity aapne jab se bol diya na, I think opportunities are flooding in, which again ASSOCHAM can look at that. Yes, why not our own? Why not if we can have a gem, why can't we create our own framework?
No,
and Mr. Acharya, with the experience that we have.
Yeah. Let me have a stab at it, and then I'll defer to Acharya Saab's conclusion on this. But my having successfully and unsuccessfully raised capital in this space over many years, I can tell you this: all the risk assessment frameworks are international, whether it is FII, whether it is DFI, whether it is PEVC. Their protocols are largely consistent globally, and in the name of consistency, creates a fairly significant challenge for the Indian entrepreneur, startup, or the Indian business which is trying to raise capital, because a lot of the questions that are framed in a very different context. So I see this as twofold. One, a lot of the risks, real risks, are not captured by those frameworks. And a lot of the a lot of the issues that are dwelt upon in great detail are of less consequence here. And I think there is definitely a need for an adaptation of the key frameworks. The IFC the IFC performance standards and the Equator principles were an attempt to move in that direction. And there is some degree of localization that has happened in each of their major investment areas. So you will find that the way EP is applied in India, or IFC performance standards are applied in India by the relevant banks and financial institutions is slightly different from the way it is applied in Europe. The framework remains the same. The application is in the hands of local practitioners. There is definitely an opportunity for us to inform that. I don't think ASSOCHAM or organizations, industry organizations, will be able to sell a protocol to investors. I think what we can do is to inform the investors and their existing protocols onto making it more relevant for investing in emerging economies, so that even the risks are captured correctly and some of the unnecessary bureaucracy and paperwork that comes with some of those protocols is avoided. But Acharya Saab has a lot of experience in this space as well. So over to him.
Thank you, Bhasin. If I understand the question is, and I break it question to two forms. One is that the need of a taxonomy applicable to India. That question, I fully agree with the person who has asked the questions, that in India, we need to have a taxonomy that is applicable to our conditions, rather than, because right now what is happening, people are referring to EU taxonomy which came, and many times, at least in my sector, I have argued with international investors that this has not relevance to the conditions with which we are operating. So therefore, I completely agree that we need to have a taxonomy, maybe for Asia or at least for India. And for that, if ASSOCHAM works or anybody wants to work, I will fully support that, because we need it, number one. Number two, as far as investment is concerned right now, most of the investments are coming from developed countries. You know, I mean, recently we also raised for a sustainability bond in JSW Energy. You would have seen that in news. So, and they are relying on the international protocols, and there are many, as Masood told, and mostly people are using the ICMA guidelines. And there is a ISO 14030 also is ISO 14000. I'm forgetting that number, but anyway, that is in the process of development. That will be applicable to all the sector. But the question again, when ISO 14000 series, that I think 14030, when it come into play and it is finally acceptable, we need still criteria. So therefore, we need a taxonomy, and I completely agree. I will be for it, Masood, if we can have a taxonomy for India.
Excellent. So that becomes another agenda item for our next council meeting.
I think this session has raised a lot of agenda items for the next council meeting, and absolutely, I think with the kind of scale that we are looking at, and that circle that Mr. Malik showed, there is tremendous requirement for localization, for looking at the concerns over here, and then looking at it in either way. As Mr. Acharya said, that we could perhaps treat it as an agenda item, actually look at creating a new taxonomy that's applicable here, or what Mr. Malik said, that why can't we just look at guiding and taking things like the EP and all, and seeing how can they be more localized, indigenized, suitable for the local markets over here, and then implemented effectively.
Just one.
There's another question.
Sorry, one last comment on this topic.
Yeah, please.
One of the easiest ways to drive a new taxonomy and a new approach, or a localized approach when it comes to investment appraisals or ISO 14030, and as and when it comes into as the standard for environmental performance monitoring, would be to run training programs. You train the assessors, yeah, and the taxonomy will emerge. You try and change the standard, it'll be many years of fighting.
Absolutely.
But to train the assessors in how to apply those standards and protocols in India, the key focus areas, the right terminologies and taxonomy, and I think maybe there is an opportunity there. So I'll stop there.
I agree with you, Masood. But the point what I was making, in fact, the investors, they, depending on the investor where from he is coming, they have their own set of requirements. They will ask a organization's raising fund has to meet. When you do not have a national or international standard, I think 14,030, when it comes, it will solve a lot of problems internationally. But still, then there will be need for a localized taxonomy where we need to think about it.
Yes, and in fact, if I can just throw in my 2 bits over here, I think, as an architect, the day I walked into college, metaphorically speaking, we were told by our faculty that, look, a lot of people are going to come to you with a lot of demands. And somebody will come to you with a photo from a building in New York, and someone will come to you with a photo from a building that they saw in their last visit to Europe, and they'll ask you for that building. Your responsibility as an architect in India is going to be to build a building that works here. And your challenge is going to be to convince the client that they should not try and build that building over here. And the risk is that it is quite likely that your first project will come in by the time you're 45 and your first child will be born by the time you're 55. And but given that you're going to walk down this path and you've taken this path, you've got to be ready to walk the talk. And I think that with what Mr. Malik said and what Mr. Acharya said, it's if we keep training the assessors, and do what, say, for example, Kushagra and I collaborated on doing. We created a local version of the Energy Conservation Building Code for Kerala in Malayalam. Because we said, look, the kind of questions that you can ask in the local language will really challenge the code and will really ask the hardest hitting questions. Is it really relevant to the grassroots in my state or in my city or in my village or not? And then we did the same thing for Punjab and so on and so forth. So I think this is a very pragmatic approach that you train the assessors, let the assessors ask the questions. Once the assessors are well equipped and trained enough, they will guide the international investor to say, look, this is relevant here, this is not relevant here. Here are the numbers to back it. And here's the evidence to back it. This is the tax regime. This is the legal regime. This is the governance framework. And I think that we should modify it. And I don't think anybody would not buy that argument. Right? So perfect. There is one question that I think I would like to ask, which is, oh my God, there are so many questions. The last time I flagged that question, it's actually flown down. Yes, what is the view of panelists on the issues of liabilities on directors of companies or investors on climate change impact due to their business or investments? Mr. Malik is laughing.
I think
the question is open to either of you.
No, I think Masood should answer this question. I'm not a director.
Actually, this goes beyond just the traditional definition of ESG. You have to step back, look at sustainability as a whole, and director liability has to be seen through 2 lenses. The first is the lens of law, which is there's a fiduciary responsibility specified under law and under relevant guidelines that is applicable to all directors, and then you're supposed to discharge that, and your failure to discharge that can lead to all kinds of consequences, which extend to individual prosecution as well in cases of gross negligence, where your fiduciary responsibility was not followed and there is evidence that you were aware and yet you did not act. There is a secondary lens as well, which is frankly something that is far more everyday for people like us. The day I was appointed the occupier of the company, my blood pressure went up 5 notches, and the reason is, irrespective of how the company is doing, the sense of responsibility is extremely high. So even though law may or may not put that onus, a good board and a good set of shareholders actually hold you to even higher level of fiduciary responsibility and performance standard than what the law does. And frankly, I believe that as long as our directors are part of a well-structured board and have the active shareholders who are challenging and a good set of independents who are counter-challenging, I think we will not have to look at what the law says, because every day there'll be checks and balances, especially on the governance side, especially in terms of the issues. There is a third comment to be made here. Some of the ESG risks are long-term. Like I said, the taxes will be paid by my son. Yeah. And there, I think bringing them up and front and center in certain organizations, in certain boards, is the responsibility of each one of us. So especially those risks or those consequences which are not in the lifespan of an investment. Typically, all investments have a horizon, right? So it's a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, even bonds, even debt structures have a particular life. Sustainability considerations and risks often go beyond that kind of horizon. It is up to everyone in this group to bring those issues front and center to decision making today, because often some of those issues in an investor's mind space will be like, I'm here for 3 years, why should I worry about it? I'm here for 5 years, why should I worry about it? And I think that is the real challenge as directors, I think, and as professionals. It doesn't matter at what level we are in an organization or what role we are in, we have to keep pushing this agenda up the food chain.
Absolutely. That's absolutely extraordinary. And that's, Mr. Malik, that is something that we've just begun to start working on. I'm so happy that you're saying this, because again, professional hazard, so I'm just sharing it, that at the school and the university level, we keep telling students that you've got to look beyond what we've so far looked at. Stop looking at 3-year time horizons, 5-year time horizons. Don't say that, look, I don't have the capacity to think 20 years into the future. Just look back 20 years. You have the capacity to project. And just keeping that as a moral compass in mind, that look, there are some taxes that my son is going to pay. I think that's good enough to at least keep your bearings on track and make sure that you yourself, at least, as the managing director, as the leader, is taking the right decisions in terms of environmental strategy. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Malik. Of course, I just want to add one more thing, which is the whole aspect of what you said, that look, a good set of investors, a good board, if the directors all have their head on their shoulders square, they will hold you to a much higher fiduciary responsibility than what the legal framework or the tax framework would do. So I feel that there is again a huge opportunity to actually train the investors, to train the people. And here I'd like to acknowledge somebody who's been advising us in the background, Mr. Apurv Kaushik from IIFL. IIFL, again, you might be aware, as an organization, is very strongly looking at how to sensitize the investors. Where do we get the investment from, such that it is being driven by ESG? They're working on this, and a lot of what we did in terms of questions was guided by him. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. All right. Any further questions that you could spot? Yes, Mr. Acharya, sorry.
On this point, I just want to keep informed that, I can confirm that climate change related discussions right now is happening in all of the board meetings, and also each of the investors, they are really asking tough question on this climate change mitigation, what the company is doing. That I can confirm. That started happening. It's no more, it is going to happen.
Absolutely, Mr. Acharya. I think that's very true. In fact, I have, it's interesting, Shailendra has asked some very good questions, but he's also, the last two questions, we're lucky as shareholders, activism is not really strong in India as it is in the US or Europe. That is a risk that will emerge soon in India as well. Can't really say, Mr. Singh, I think there's a fair share of activism over here as well. Maybe being proactive the way we are and the kind of panelists we have and what they've shared with us, we may not need activism to come up if there is proactive work that's being done by the corporates and the businesses themselves. And Shailendra has also said that a good board is a myth, especially in India. So I think there's a hint of cynicism there, but I'm sure that with the kind of comments that are coming from our panelists, it's very clear. It's very apparent that that's not entirely true. A good board is not entirely a myth. It is something that a lot of businesses are fortunate to have, as is the investor group. So with those words, I just wanted to ask if there's anything else, any closing remarks that are to be made, or anything that in closing the panelists would like to share. Mr. Malik or Mr. Acharya. In fact, I do recall Mr. Acharya sharing some very interesting anecdotes and Mr. Malik that of transitions that you have seen in the past of board pushback and to where you have come today. So we'd love to hear how your personal journey has been to really coming to the culmination. I feel that this discussion is not only the beginning, but also the culmination of a lot of the experiences that you have had personally in your lives. So we'd love to hear hear from you on that.
You want me to go first? Or?
Yeah, please, Mr. Acharya, absolutely.
I will not take much time. I'll tell one thing here that towards the end of my career, I realized that this, initially when we started this profession, so we always that thought our presence is never felt, our absence are always felt. But since last couple of years, I would say 1 year, I could see the tables have turned. And in this field, whoever is practicing in sustainability or ESG field, the things have changed. Now you are in the forefront. With that comes a lot of responsibility. The main responsibility, we must understand that in this field, we are the catalysts. We make things happen, but we do not think by ourselves. So those who are aspiring to build their career in this field, please keep in that mind. And one thing I can assure you that whoever in this field, and if you are passionate, you will really love to see that you have done some different, you have made some difference, and that is satisfying. And I always call that we are in a mission. Our mission is to change the mindset of the people who has capacity to or capability to make decisions. And the result of their decisions will be reaped by our next generations. So we have also a moral obligations to make these things happen, the changes happen. So with that, I'll stop.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Acharya. Golden words really to bring this panel to a close. I'd like to request Mr. Malik also to share his views.
Yeah, thanks. I think once again, I will just follow the lead that Acharya Saab has laid out for us. I think my key takeaways or learnings have been that that there is, for sustainability as an agenda and for sustainability professionals, we are at a point of inflection. There's never been a time that we have been as relevant as we are today. And this is an opportunity that we must recognize as professionals, as entrepreneurs, as businesses, that there is something changing, and time is of essence, and certain decisions and steps have to be taken. My message is one: I have no distinction really. I often say that my only distinction is that I've lost more money in the environmental field than anybody else in this country, and I can just share my takeaways from those mistakes. The first is that I think scale. There is a lot of good sustainability initiatives, whether in corporates or whether in business, as ventures. Remain in the garage, remain pilot, remain demonstration, remain in labs. Think scale. And this is one big message, because scale attracts investment. Scale is easier. Even if you fail, the impact will be visible. So think scale. The second is, this journey for innovation is rare. Yeah. So do not strive to be the first guy to do a touchscreen phone or the first electric car. Be an Apple, a fast follower, or be a Tesla in the sustainability space, where you perfected the product. So be a fast follower. Do not try to necessarily break the ecosystem by saying it will be transformative, because that kind of transformation success is 1 in 100. 99 fast followers are required today to create the impact that we need. So in innovation, yes, we have to invest in it, but you cannot put all your eggs in the innovation basket. And the third, there is a huge opportunity for localization of technology and of social inclusion. I think as a business opportunity alone, I think we are, like for carbon, like for water, pricing mechanisms are better established. I have a feeling that for social inclusion and for creating impact in the communities where we operate, there will be a value mechanism emerging soon. And I think with that, the ESG sort of continuum will be clear in terms of economic value that it creates, and it will attract capital. There's $1 billion that we were able to raise in this space, which was impossible a few years ago. The rate of change is significant. And I think I would invite everyone who's interested in this space to take the step today, not wait for tomorrow. And we will see very, very amazing partnerships and an ecosystem getting formed. All the best.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik. Thank you for walking the talk, for actually sharing and setting up that ecosystem in this webinar today. If there's one word that describes what happened today, it was Jugalbandi. That Mr. Acharya said what he said, and Mr. Malik, you could just take it forward and string it. And I think we've got excellent views. There are so many messages of thanks coming in from our listeners. Great webinar, very practical suggestions and comments. On a supremely positive and optimistic note, do not give up. Don't let your experiments or your dreams rot away in the labs. Pull them out, think scale, and remember that you're on a mission, and that mission is likely to not just take advantage of that inflection point today, and likely to encounter some very positive feedback from the industry, but also be beneficial to our children who are going to be liable to pay those taxes. So beautifully put together. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank the panelists for an excellent session. And I'd like to just pass it over to Neeraj ji and Kushagra for the closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Gaurav. And you call it Jugalbandi, and I'll call it Shandar, Jabardast, and Jindabad. Because why, Gaurav? Because we are doing webinars since last 1.5 years. But the flood of questions I have seen in this webinar, I have never seen before. We have just 3 speakers talking, and we were planning it this webinar for 60 minutes, but it is almost 90 minutes, and I think we can discuss for another couple of hours. And the webinar was so interactive. I can't say. So I'll not call it a vote of thanks. I'll call it the way forward. And for that, I would like to invite Kushagra. Kushagra, if you can, take it forward. Yeah.
Definitely. So Gaurav, I think this is a great start to one of the many that we plan in the series, and I think you ended with the right note. Jugalbandi can be the name of this webinar series, and we can keep having this Jugalbandi on and on with experts of the likes of Mr. Malik and Mr. Acharya. Thank you, Mr. Malik, for taking out time, accepting the invitation, and sharing the insights that were enlightening. Thank you, Mr. Acharya. You were truly amazing, and we learned a lot from you. Especially with the question that 10 years we've been working in the field of energy management, and now suddenly there's ESG, and I think there's a lot of young professionals, there are a lot of people who echo with a lot of changes that are happening, but I think the climate is changing, and so should we. So with that note, thank you everyone. Thank you, Gaurav, for making it a Jugalbandi and accepting the invite, and we look forward to having many more such events. Thank you everyone once again. Thanks for joining, all the audience, and for your valuable questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.